there's virtually no Barbadian who's not enthralled by its bold and infectious dance movements. As a public spectacle, the Barbados Landship is almost unsurpassed, commanding a captive crowd of spectators whenever its engine strikes up. It's easy to see this Barbadian cultural institution as a mere provider of public comedy. But those who've delved beyond the surface into the nature and history of this organization paint a far more serious picture. One such person is Marcia Burrowes, a cultural scholar with the University of the West Indies. She holds to the view that the Landship masquerade has a far greater significance than meets the eye of the casual observer.
Yes, it has been argued they're British uniforms, but they certainly did not look so. By the time the different Landship members attached several plumes, lots of gold and green and yellow ropes, they used to laugh at and say, oh, they don't look like the British Navy. That's the point. They didn't look like the British Navy. And once they started to dance what they call their naval maneuvers, certainly they were not being the British Navy because no Navy dances. So if we're seeing culture as something which is creolized, which is a combination and it evolves and it grows, you've got your uniforms, and we in a sense have been taught to see them as mimicking black people, black working class and poor, mimicking white British culture. I'm saying no. I'm saying if we see the uniform as a cloak, that then they can do their dances, do their marchings from before, keep their susu and do all those things, then we get another analysis or another reading of this thing that we know now as the Landship.
Tracing the origins of the Landship takes us to the 1860s and one Moses Wood, a Barbadian who served in the British Navy and lived in Wales and England. The story goes that on returning home, he organized a society for purposes of mutual aid and to reproduce the camaraderie and discipline of naval life. Landship researcher Aviston Downs mentions 1863 and 1868 as the years when this might have happened. Downs says there is no documented evidence that the movement began in either of those years, but he spoke of documented evidence of the ship's existence from the 1890s. And according to Downs, notwithstanding the distinctive Barbadian characteristics of the local ship, the practice of parading in military gear was not unique to Barbados at the time.
The Landship is bigger than Barbados. In terms of how we conceptualize the Landship, it has been seen as something unique to Barbados, peculiar to Barbados. I've contended that in fact you need to look at the whole expression of maritime culture across the Black Atlantic, bearing in mind that from the 18th century, blacks were very prominent as members of ships' crews in the British Navy. Significantly so. And that in terms of spreading culture and ideology from South Africa, West Africa, North America, Caribbean, that you have the influence of seamen. So it's not surprising to me that you have an oral tradition that suggests that this man lived at Cardiff and Southampton, within port cities in Britain, where in fact there would have been local communities of sailors of all shades, and from the white black diaspora, the crewmen, Caribbean blacks, British soldiers, British sailors, sorry.
Poor whites too.
Poor whites, of course, and therefore in that context, you're having a kind of hybridization that's taking place beyond the insular context of Barbados.
Stripped of all its regalia and choreography, the Landship functions much like a working-class friendly society, providing its membership with cash insurance for purposes of illness, maternity, or death. As its name suggests, it pretends to be a ship on land, its leadership bearing such naval titles as Lord High Admiral, Commander, and Captain, and bedecking themselves in gold tassels, medals, and peaked caps. Captain Vernon Watson, the head of the ship.
Well, the uniform is the whole body, the composition of the movement. Because if you know, let me go back there, Ronnie, because that's a very important question. Because we interpret the Navy. That is from the inception. Moses come here, and in the year 1863, and he say that he going because he missed which is regular, not he missed that life at sea. and he get together some of his. We don't know whether it was his age group or younger or older people, but he get some fellas and bestow on them all the uniforms and ranks and regalia, and then put officers ranks to fierce fellas. And we have from the Admiral back down to the Skylight Boy.
Women came into the movement by the early 1900s, designated as nurses or stars. The ships which kept their independence named themselves after British naval vessels: Iron Duke, Nelson, Dreadnought, and Cornwall. Each ship had a regular meeting place called, not unexpectedly, a dock, with masts and sails on the roof.
From the inception of the Landship, the main nights, Friday nights, is always a very significant night. It's what you call a ship night. A ship night is where we meet and we pay our dues, our contributions. Like what you have, well, this is a modern thing. You just had the money you pay will record in the book. But now we introduce a contribution card, something like this, where what you pay is recorded in your card and in the book.
As a working class movement, the Landship expanded significantly during the 1920s, and by the early 30s there were 3 fleets of over 60 ships, with about 3,000 men and 800 women.
We know now what is called the Barbados Landship as one ship, but we're talking about several ships. That in the 1920s and 30s we can find 30-something ships. There are claims that there were ships that were over 100 and something persons. There be even in the 1970s we know we had about 12 ships, 8 to 12 ships when there was the next revival of the ship. So it meant that you can have a landship or 2 or 3 or 4 in St. Michael and more probably 2 in St. Peter, 2 in St. Philip, wherever. And each ship had a captain, and each ship then would have the nurses and the commanders. You had an overall admiral, the last one was Admiral Marcia that we've spoken about, but you had different ships.
No ship can travel without an engine, not even a landship. But this ship's movements, or movementations, are generated in its choreography, and the engine driving those movements is the Tuk band.
It was a crucible of historical importance in terms of the dance movements. All the things that you can see, I mean, Vango and all that, but there were complex movements that people used to be involved in. And the better bands had all these complex movements that they could do.
Yeah, and that depends a lot about who was leading the ship, because from St. Joseph, I've had someone telling me about the 1930s in St. Joseph where they actually used to scrub, part of the movement was scrubbing the deck. Scrubbing the deck, something that we don't see. And certain things for the women to do, certain things for men to do, certain things for the quartermaster to do.
In the hands of Tuk connoisseurs like these, this motley assortment of musical instruments comprising bass drum, kettle drum, flute and triangle is capable of sailing any landship through rough seas. Tuk musician Willock describes the relationship between the Landship and the Tuk band.
The Landship really existed first, and the Tuk band became the engine of that ship, to the extent that, okay, as we were hearing now, you would see when the Landship first coming on, you might hear a waltz being played. Right. The waltz as a slow beat will represent that the boat now move off. Right. And you're only hitting about 20 pounds of steam, so the boat moving fairly slowly. Then you increase your steam, you pump up your steam to about 40 pounds. The 40 pounds of steam now will be represented by the fasci or the march, because now you're more up tempo. When you hit the real Tuk now, and you're up there, you're hitting 60 and 80 pounds of steam, and the boat sailing. That is the ship. The steam is what will be pushing the ship, and the ship, well, we call it a landship.
So the steam is what we really call the 440.
Yeah, the 440 real Tuk is when you get into 80 pounds of steam and the boat really tickling really and moving through the water. You know what I mean? So, but then what happened is, it became a time when the Tuk band was so recognized that it became an entity in itself, that it wasn't just then the engine of the landship. you had the Landship with the tuk. That's one entity. Then you could get that tuk by itself.
Engine by itself.
The engine by itself now, with the characters now, which would be reminiscent of the African heritage of these characters, because this character thing, the African thing, you have the Moko Jumbi all through the Caribbean, you have the Mother Sally, which is the Dame Lorraine, is the all sort of thing, you have the Shaggy Bear type of character, the Shags, covered face, all through the right, you have the donkey. I made this equestrian thing, there was an African tribe that used to do this on a normal basis, but instead of using donkey, they had horse. Okay. But used to dress up the horses, and you know this pretty costume thing. So our thing about donkey is following that tradition, but we also have behind that the whole steel donkey thing that used to hear with steel donkey coming down, so I move out the way and that sort of thing. And of course, the donkey was used to transport the canes from the field to the factory, and that's how the economy was built. So there's a lot of things tied up together with these characters, you know.
And most of those tunes were mission songs, playing in the tempo that the flutemen prefer to play in. This is not really known publicly, you know. In other words, people don't realize that the Landship never play banjo or anything. In fact, not the one mission. Even now, we play all mission songs.
Ife Wilkinson, another Tuk percussionist, described the special dynamics of the Barbadian Tuk rhythms.
The basic fundamentals of playing is on the kettle is with 2 sticks. And we have a gentleman here that we can actually have a look at that briefly. And if you're looking at the 6, the feel of 6 are notes that are played equally with each hand. And then you identify a louder or softer note in order to help you also connect with the rhythm. So a good way of doing that is basically we're going to start with the basics that I've showed you, which is the 2 simple notes for the 6, and it's played right in the center of the drum. So this is basically what you get out of the 6. If you look at it as a raw 2 sticks hitting the drum, this is what it looks like. Any variations you make from here help you to identify the rhythm as a unit. But that's basically having a listen to the 6 without using the drum as Barbadians do, because I want to stress this very carefully, that whilst these drums are played across the world, including the Caribbean, the only persons that plays these drums this way are Barbadians. Hence the name Tuk Band from a Bajan point of view, however you want to put it. It's a local traditional thing that we have now developed, and it's based upon these simple things. Now going to what we call the chime, so you get the difference in sound. All that's being done here is to move the stick from one location to another. It changes the tone, it gives you that unique Barbadian sound. And you'll find the elderly guys or the more traditional guys will tell you you're playing the kettle and you're playing the chime. The chime would turn out to be the ending of the drum. If you stop playing the chime, you're actually playing the same thing over and over. What identifies the differences in sound is the moving of the stick from one point to the other.
In accordance with modern tradition, the flute and pennywhistle are the instruments of melody for the Tuk band. But other instruments are and have been used in this role as well. Among them the fiddle, the saxophone, and the voice.
It's only in the early 1900s the fiddle went out and the flute came in, and it's not even a local flute for the most part, it's an English flute. Right. What we call the pennywhistle, the sea flute, the Clark flute. Some people here and other places would have been able then to get some bamboo and actually create a wooden flute. Right. But the point is the flute had come in there. So you have that progression from singing with the tuk, to fiddle with the tuk, to flute with the tuk, and now Seaman got sax with the tuk.
That's interesting.
You know, and I just put tuk in my jazz show.
Okay.
So it just traveling, you know, it just the development.
The music that was played was the same music that was played away from the Landship. One was singing, and then they play instrumental. And I think that's how the instrumental aspect of Tuk Band evolved, because in contemporary times, a lot of those guys didn't know the lyrics, and therefore you will see it. But what is interesting is if you read Attila the Hand's book, where Attila talks about see my little long brown girl calls you for me, something which was burnt cane. Had a piece of burnt cane and ground them ground and so don't burn them down. Murder in the Market, Murder, and there was another one. There were 4 songs, and I discovered a 5th one. But the 4 songs that were popular in the 1900s, remember, in those days, melodies remained the same for donkey years. Right? It wasn't until the 20s that then you begin to get a variety of melodies. But what he was referring to, and he said it was too stiff for a Lego in the context of Trinidad. Well, you only have to look at contemporary use of the tuk in terms of, let's say, Edwin Yarwood, whose lyrics parallel the rhythm of the music. Not necessarily punka, because punka was struggling against arrangers who arrange everything traditionally. Punka had to add in the tuk at the beginning or at the end, right? But the contemporary things from the 94 begin to use tuk as an integral part of the whole music, the lyrics, the words. If you listen to them, the words had the cadence of the rhythms and so on, right? And I'm saying that if as early as 1900 the music penetrated Trinidad, it means the tuk had an existence before that.
Veteran tuk musicians like John Hunt, known as Seaman, and Old Man Hope are good repositories of traditional tuk band melodies.
That is a favorite song. It said, Mama and Papa were sailing one day down by the cold riverside. Some of them turned to the boatman and said, oh, me over the side. Oh, me over the side, boatman. Oh, me over the side. Someone out there just is waiting for me, so oar me over the tide.
I had a gentleman by a store in town near T. Herbert. T. Herbert used to bring these flutes original. At the time a flute, it cost 75 cents. A Clark flute. Up to now they ain't got back the original flute yet that the tuk band used to play with.
So the original flute you said was a Clark?
It's a Clark flute. But the trade in making the flute, but the original flute, I had one on home to show them, but I can't get the phone now. That is the flute that used to make the tuk band ring.
In the waltz, you would get the song Adam and Eve, which is the real authentic traditional waltz song. Banana, da, da, da. Right, correct. And then as Punko would say, you build up to you're building up to full steam, where you get medium steam or the fascino, you get another traditional song, we call it the Caledonian. You know, right. So that is one of the traditional songs. And then with the fast tuck now, we have one or two songs. We have a song Burn Cane. Then we have Granum Grong. These are the real traditional songs. And your favorite song that is Suki.
Suki,
right?
That's my favorite.
More recently now, Tuk Band Rhythm. Right. Okay, right. That was the real traditional tuk band song. So yes, there are a couple of traditional songs that we still, incorporate in what we do. I mean, I play a lot of familiar songs of the present time, waltz, Farsi, whatever, and tuk, but I still make sure, to keep the tradition as part of it. The majority of times I always start with one of the traditional songs, whether it be the Farsi, the waltz, or the 4/4, the tuk.
In more recent times, the saxophone joined the list of tuk melody makers. The Rose Hill Tuk Band is one of the groups that use the saxophone.
Right now, why we use the sax, we don't get as much, we in the north don't get as much flutemen as before. It's hard to get flutemen in Barbados. You will get kiltmen and bassmen, but not a fluteman.
Between the saxophone, between the flute and the saxophone, is a terms different fingering all together. The flute carry 6 notes. But what you got to do with the flute, to get high notes, you got to cut the notes. Still, you could play not like the saxophone, you got to cut the notes with your finger to get high notes. But the saxophone now, got on some notes on it. You got the high octave, you can make another high octave for yourself. Once you got the book and know what you're doing. The saxophone got high F sharp, it got high G sharp, and that but you got to know the finger to get it.
Historians and students of Barbadian folklore are still uncertain about the origins of the name Tuk. Elombe Mottley says the music has been known by other names.
People in St. Andrew call it Gumbe, right? There are other people call it Waxmanani, other people call it Ruk-A-Tuk, and then the more modern name is
Just shortening Tuk.
Shortening Tuk. But it is interesting, Aviston, that earlier before we started, you asked about the role of whites and blacks, because there was a white man called Burrowes in Shorey village that gave me the name. He said, "Oh, you're talking about Gumbe?" And I asked Maureen Warner Lewis about the origin of Gumbe, as you know, in Jamaica, to find out exactly why it was called Gumbe in that particular area. And then Christchurch area tend to call it Ruk-A-Tuk, and there was areas in St. Philip that call it Waxmanani.
Now in Bermuda, there is a thing called the Gumbe,
Yes.
which is like the Tuk band, but it's faster. And boop, 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 and it's the same amount of thing, but a different feeling altogether. And the costumes is beautiful, headpiece and whatnot. Different places, different names.
In 1932, with the help of Charles Duncan O'Neill's Democratic League, just over 30 ships united to form the Barbados Landship Association and launched their literary organ, the Landship Review. Further political support for the movement came in the 1950s from the government of the then Premier Grantley Adams, who hosted parades at his Tyrrell-Court home. Marcia Burrowes talks about the involvement of middle-class Barbadians in the early years of the organization.
Yeah, the Landship headquarters were somewhere near James Street in Bridgetown, and at that time it was called the two separate words, Landship Association, an umbrella association in which prominent members of the middle class, like Hugh Cummins, who was going to become Premier, Gordon Cummins, they were involved as well. So we had the middle class coming in with writing skills, analytical skills, and deciding to give an organizational structure to what essentially was a very working class organization.
But the ship has long passed its glory days, and in fact there are serious doubts among its leadership about its future. Faced with a dramatic decline in the number of ships, the current head of the organization, Captain Vernon Watson, grouped the remaining units into one Barbados Landship.
When I came in 72, I think it was necessary where we should have come together, I believe, to enhance the status of the landship by forming this association where I went around and we get 2 members from each of the 6 ships and formed the association. There were 6 units, so you had 2 from each unit form the association, and that's how the Barbados Landship.
Captain Watson has been waging his own battle against the threatened demise of the landship, trying to recruit young people to the movement. His efforts have borne only modest fruits.
It is myself, it is the quartermaster, Alton Graves. You have Roland there, Commander Jips. And if anything should happen to me, I don't know how the landship will survive. That's what I say now. We have Charles, he have his group in Roseville, that go by the name of Roseville Tuk Band. That might count, right? But if you see in this uniform, in the uniforms, I don't know how well it will continue.
But unless there's a dramatic turnaround in the fortunes of the movement, the inevitable demise of the present ship will bring to an end performances like this. closing once and for all another chapter in the socio-cultural history of Barbados.